Hey, this is Phil Ratcliffe with Rebel Financial. I'm joined with Greg Arenstein for our weekly live broadcast. So thanks for joining in. If you're watching us live, we got a great program for you today about an important topic that I think a lot of people avoid, and it could be a big mistake. So Greg's going to help us, clear the air, get it out there, get some good information to you about what we should be doing to take care of ourselves and our family, give the government less money, etc. So, Greg, thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, my first question is, what are some of the things that everyone should be doing estate planning wise? I think people have this mistaken thing that only rich people should do estate planning.
That's right. Estate planning is for everybody. Most clients that I meet with, we look at all of their assets and liabilities and go over certain documents they would have in place to cover emergency situations. Most clients that I meet with either have 4 or 5 documents, the 2 medical documents, the living will and healthcare power of attorney, a financial power of attorney, which is very important, and of course a last will and testament. The 5th document that some folks have is a trust, and we may talk about that a little bit later.
Okay. So, when people come in to see you, basically you're going to look over their situation and tell them, obviously they probably need these things, but you're going to explain to them exactly why and get from them what they want as well too. And I know a lot of my clients are confused on how they should sometimes title things as well too, right?
Right. So when it comes to estate planning documents and living in life, the legal system, the world around us has rules.
Sure.
We don't think of it that way, but they apply 24/7, 365. And as long as you're competent and healthy, you're in charge of your own medical care, you're in charge of your own financial decisions, you run your life. Unfortunately, there are times when you can't. Either you're in an accident, you have a medical condition or some type of problem, and if you do not have the legal documents and plan in place, then you're left with the government and the rules in place from the legislature and the legal system telling you how things will be done and what rules you have to follow and how that works. And many times that's far more expensive than planning it yourself.
And that's the most old joke in our industry is if you don't make a plan, the government's got one for you. Right?
That's exactly right. The laws are on the books, and the best way to decide how those things will be handled is to decide for yourself and not let the government decide for you.
Sure. Okay, good. So what are some additional things people should consider, like we started to get into, as they become more successful? So beyond just the basic things, as you're starting to hit middle class, upper middle class, what are some things that people should consider?
In my estate planning practice, what you see more often as folks build their nest egg is the use of trusts or trust planning, not just to avoid probate and deal with potentially some tax issues, but also just to make sure that their net worth and their inheritances are not squandered, that it's protected.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of flexibility and planning options that come into place with trusts.
Absolutely. I think that's one of an important thing that I talk to about my clients too, is it's not always just about money and taxes and what so, but a lot of times poor estate planning can ruin people's relationships if their heirs or children fight about money. Everybody tells me my kids won't fight about money, but in my experience, it is a lot more than you would think.
Yeah, it's a sad fact. That's more common than we would like, unfortunately. And good planning can go a long way to minimizing those types of situations. Obviously, if you've got a child or family members that don't get along and are bound to argue with one another, a document's not going to change that.
Sure.
However, setting things up, having a clear plan, having clear lines of authority, making your wishes known before you pass away, these are things that can be done, common sense steps to help minimize fracturing relationships.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think that, again, like what we were just getting to right there, that people even think that they're going to fight or what so. I just think human beings, we all have a different sense of what we think is fair. So it's like just protecting ourselves from human nature, and I think a lot of times I tell my clients they need to do estate planning, especially because I've seen it so much. I've seen it in my family, I've seen it with lots of clients, and I probably would have been under the same misconception that that's what reality is when it's not. It's like we don't do planning for ourselves, we do estate planning for them, right?
Well, the planning, the way I approach planning with most clients is thinking in terms of time frames. So I think about 3 phases of time with most clients. Phase 1's while you're alive. Phase 2, you've passed away, your spouse survives. Phase 3, you're both gone, and now it's with the kids.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, there's a lot of planning that can be done in Phase 1 while you're still alive that can offer protection. I mentioned a power of attorney early on. A lot of folks don't think about that when they're starting out in the estate planning world, but a power of attorney is very important because the odds of being disabled or being in an accident with diminished capacity is very real. And the costs of guardianship, which is the legal tool that's in place to deal with that with folks with diminished mental capacity, is very expensive. It involves the probate court, there's annual accounts, court costs, you have to pay lawyers to do a lot of work. It's great for our law practice to have a guardianship, but it's really bad for the clients.
Yeah.
So I try to work with folks and make them understand the importance of doing the documents and having them in place while they're alive. The medical documents and the power of attorney in particular are fairly straightforward to do. They may sit in the drawer for a long time, but when the emergency comes, it's in place, it's ready to go, and you don't have to resort to the legal system to deal with someone's affairs.
Yeah, we used to have a saying in the military is prior planning prevents poor performance. I left that one of the P's.
That's right.
So I think one of the things that, I think that we should talk about are costs. Because whether people admit it or not, like you're saying, it's way more expensive to not do the planning than to do it. But I think a lot of people are I don't want to do this, or I just think it's going to cost too much, and then they just avoid it, and then they're causing something more expensive. But, let's talk about that a little bit. What are the range? What are ways people can do things efficiently, to be more prepared rather than taking tons of the attorney's time I'll let you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, costs are a factor.
Sure.
I don't think there's anybody out there that enjoys paying legal fees. I certainly don't enjoy paying legal fees to other attorneys. But there is a cost of doing business. Not all lawyers are created equal, and what you're looking for is someone that knows what they're doing, that you're comfortable working with, and can charge a reasonable fee. That there is a good deal of work meeting with folks, understanding their situation, making sure they get the right plan in place, that it's implemented properly, and that all the bases are covered. In my experience, the basic estate planning should be less than $1,000. I'm sort of sweeping with a broad stroke
when it's just simple and you don't have to make complicated trusts.
Again, there are exceptions to that. If you own multiple pieces of real estate and there's deeds to do and you file in different places, or things are out of state, there are circumstances that could cause a planning project to go over that. But in my experience, most projects would come in less than that. And frankly, that does sound expensive. It is. That's a lot of money. But if there's a guardianship that's in place, that can be tens of thousands of dollars over the lifetime of the client. Even in the state scenario, why do I need a will? Well, if you draw up a will, you can waive the bond requirement. And bond is simply an insurance policy that's required by the law to protect the estate assets from the executor or administrator stealing the funds.
Sure.
So just the cost right there of saving that bond cost or the guardianship cost is far exceeds the cost of the basic planning.
And plus, you're talking about once every so many years too. We're not talking about they got to pay this every year, right?
That's right. What you're talking about is updating over time. Estate planning is a fluid, process that takes place over a long period of time. You do need periodic updates, but it's not like filing your tax returns every year.
Yeah.
You have to pay your accountant every year to prepare your return. It's not like that. When there's life events or major changes, that's a good time to update your estate planning. So, this expense is something that would be incurred, not even every few years, probably longer than that.
Maybe a decade. So you say at the high end, $1,000 for simple, and you divide it over 10 years, it's $100 per year. It's less than $10 a month. and people waste this in 1 week.
That's right.
On their cappuccino, and this is way more important for their family.
It is important.
Yeah.
It does require some focus. It's one thing for us to sit down and talk about something fun and exciting like college football or sports or something like that, but talking about what happens when I'm disabled and what happens when I pass away are not fun conversations. Generally, folks don't like to confront their own mortality, but the core issue here to me is really just being able to sleep better at night, knowing that you've done the planning, that you've got your bases covered, your family's protected, that you're not going to artificially lose money for wasted expenses or delays, things of that nature. And just some simple planning and putting those tools in place can go a long way to minimizing those risks.
So, I know you had mentioned to me before that there have been some law changes and some things that could actually simplify people's planning. Some things that may have changed in Ohio. Obviously, everybody's pretty familiar with legalization of gay marriage and there's a lot of planning that had gone into that before that may need changed. So what are some examples?
That's right. The law is a fluid area. You do need to pay attention to law changes. The most important changes, I would say, over the last 5-10 years are in the estate tax area. The estate tax, or it's called, the death tax, is something that has been on the books for a long time at the federal level, the state level as well.
Yeah.
The good news for taxpayers was in 2012 there were some significant changes at the federal and state level. The biggest change to me is that the Ohio state tax was repealed.
Gone.
That's right.
That's awesome.
That's right. It was affecting most taxpayers when they passed away, and now it's gone. So and
it'll probably change again in the future. Yeah.
It's just a stroke of the pen with the legislature, and the governor, and the Congress, and the president, and it changes. That's right. At the federal level, the estate tax, the exemption that we can apply against the tax itself, was raised above $5 million, indexed for inflation, and the top rates were lowered from the 55% very confiscatory level down to 40%, which again is still very high.
Sure.
But the exemption being over $5 million per person means that most regular folks, 99% of the population, is not dealing with the federal estate tax in the main.
So I guess, we talked about trust. Maybe just name a couple of them, just really simply, and like some of the situations. I mean, we're getting kind of to the end of our broadcast, but to give somebody a little bit of specific, like trust. I hear trust, and I just think trust, but like they have specific purposes.
That's right.
To like solve problems.
That's right. Yeah. Trusts are. To a lot of folks, they've heard the word or familiar with trust fund baby or trust account or some such things, or may have heard it from friends and neighbors or out at networking events. And really, trusts are sort of like pickup trucks. They're very useful. They come in all sizes, shapes, colors, can do all kinds of different things. And once you have one, it's pretty handy to have.
Yeah.
But you don't have to have one. It's an estate planning tool just like anything else. They're able to be customized to fit particular goals and objectives. The most important ones, in my experience with clients, are using a trust to avoid probate, create privacy, and delay an inheritance or decide who gets what, when, and how.
So like a will has to be executed immediately, but the trust can continue to enforce its rules.
That's right. A probate estate process usually is 6 to 18 months, which sounds like a long time, but it's kind of assets in, bills paid, dollars out, estate closed in less than 2 years. Whereas a trust, if the inheritance is in there, can be stretched over many years as children grow up and have families of their own. And is a very powerful tool to achieve those types of objectives. I hear from a lot of folks that, I'd like the assets to be around to pay for my kids or grandkids' education.
Sure.
The tool they need is a trust.
Yeah.
An estate and a will won't do that. The other thing about trusts is that a lot of trusts were put in place based on the prior law. And in the old days, we had to use what we call an A-B trust type of system, or a marital trust, credit shelter trust. And that tool, quite frankly, is not really necessary
anymore. Lots of money.
Given the high exemption rates and the transferability of the estate tax exemption. So what I'm doing with a lot of clients over the last few years is simplifying their estate plans, getting out of some of these complex structures and making it a little more simple, easier to understand, and easier to manage.
I'd say one of the ones that my clients have liked more when we talk about things and do things is having a conduit put into there for like their retirement assets, so that the kids have to take the required minimum distributions rather than lump summing it and paying big taxes. And then that might be awesome for their retirement too, but it's really tempting when they're 20 to 30 to just take it all and buy some stuff.
Yeah,
you know? So
it's funny you mentioned that, because a lot of our clients are focused on planning and tax planning in particular, and a lot of effort goes into this, what we call stretch planning with IRAs. Mm-hmm. And the reality in my practice is when most children get that opportunity, they want to take the lump sum.
Yeah, we see that all the time too.
It's poor tax planning. It may be good for them in the short run, but again, they'll
probably be happier when they're 30 or 40 or even 50, you know? So
right. So a trust, again, the rules have been loosened over the years, mm-hmm. and make trusts an option. It's not always the best option, but it is an option for the right situation where you can use the trust, as you say, as a conduit. And essentially, mm-hmm. the trustee functions as a traffic cop, if you will, between the account and pulling the distributions out,
sure.
and then handing them over to the beneficiaries. So a way to prevent a child or grandchild from getting those lump sum, poor planning type distributions is to use the trust as a conduit. And again, that's another tool that we can fold into trust planning.
Awesome. Well, we want to thank you for being here. Before we go off, you know, if anybody wants to get in contact with you, Greg, Arenstein and Andersen, tell them how they can find you and get in touch with you.
Well, I suppose the easiest way is to jump on the web and find our website. We've got the site right here. It's aacolpa.com. That's an acronym for Arenstein Andersen Company Legal Professional Association. All our contact information's on there. You can give us a call, send us an email. We'd be glad to help. We've got good lawyers. We do a pretty broad array of services for our mm-hmm. clients. And we don't charge for every little thing like most law firms.
I've noticed that. I like that about you. Yeah.
We do charge for the work that we do.
Absolutely.
But initial calls, initial meetings, talking about maybe doing a project or not, you're not on the clock for those types of things. And we try to be fair with our legal fees with our clients.
Awesome. So there are also links from our website, because they're a partner of ours, help a lot of our clients. Below the video, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or what, so we'll comment and post the actual web address where you guys can click on it. Join us next week. We're going to have Tony Jones on, who's also a financial advisor at Rebel Financial. We're going to be talking about 401k plans design, some of the cool things that are even coming around with multi-employer design plans, which might really reduce costs. There's some legislation going through right now that we're really hoping is going to pass, and it looks like it's good on both sides of the aisles. We're also hoping to have one of the more progressive payroll providers that we're working with, because we are very much about tech, and you don't have to be, but it makes your life easy to where we can make everything connect, so that when you do something, when you pay them, everything gets done, the contributions, if the employee wants to change the percent or what, so it's just all automatic. So anyways, I think that should be an awesome discussion. Thanks again so much, Greg, for being here, and thank you guys for joining in. We appreciate your patronage. We will see you next week.